I took part in Project Mathematicus as a freelance programmer. Maybe you have watched the commercial. The name, a romanization of the Greek term for mathematician, doubled as a pun, joining mathematic to us. The ad was promoting a surgical procedure that promised to make certain mathematical computations semi-autonomously present in conscience. Upon receiving control of a modest number of neurons in the brain, the implant would in turn allow instant identification of properties for an endless array of functions and their graphs, such as the value of the integral at any given segment, and grant prescience in all problems which can be solved using classical geometry, trigonometry, algebra, and analysis without the need of reading or studying. As the commercial faded to black, you were left with a strip of all-white text that read, "Keep a computer in the corner of your mind." The idea was that while mathematics is of paramount importance, many people lack the flair for it, and the implant would, so to speak, remove the individual from the equation. It was purported to work with everyone, owing to the restricted number of neurons required to be fully functional. Mathematicus ad featured Matthew, the first ever human to get the implant. This was a pseudonym in the same vein as Mathematicus, and to be read as Matthew. His real name was Stefan, and he had a scrawny physique, long tar-black hair, and pronounced acne. In the commercial, he embodied the archetypal character of a vibrant but disinterested youth who preferred to play games and didn't mind his grades steadily falling, until one day his worried parents, having heard of Mathematicus, decided to gift him the wondrous powers of the implant, and themselves peace of mind. The boy in the ad relented out of teenage capriciousness, but soon became enamored with his new abilities. Shortly after the ad appeared, the company cryptically announced that the implant required adjustments. Having already made sales and scheduled operations, they canceled all surgeries, reimbursed their clients, and swiftly disappeared. The few outsiders who paid attention to it all would warily conclude that Mathematicus had been a scam and melancholically surmise that only in the commercial's sugary and make-believe world would anyone see their life changed by the implant. But this wasn't true, for surgery had taken place, and it did change the life of Stefan. I want to share with you Stefan's journal, which was sent to me by an insider. To this day, I do not know who it was. July 6th. Now there is a point in keeping notes. I begin to see what the doctor meant when he spoke of an area in my brain becoming independent. I feel that there is a border beyond which I do not have control. Of course, it's the origin of all those mathematical thoughts, or I should say, thoughts, for they don't feel like thoughts. How would I describe them? Here again, an example the doctor gave has some merit. He said that the relation between information provided by the implant to information acquired by my own thinking should be that of reading someone's translation of a text in an unknown language, to having learned the language and translated the text yourself. There is something final in what I get from that area in my brain, but I can check it and realize that it is valid by using, for lack of a better word, the rest of my brain. Here is a case of that. Actually, here is the simplest of the cases. I read the equation y equals 2x squared minus 3. Of course, I know that this is a parabola. On my own, I could graph it. On my own, I could also calculate its vertex. But the other area in my brain immediately presented the graph as a mental image which could be zoomed in and out. I thought of the number 125, and this instantly got the image to zoom to 31247 on the y-axis. I couldn't believe it, but it was easy to check, and so I did. I felt amazed and a little bit scared. I then did the same with more complicated functions. The independent area was delegated to graph all of them, and again I checked. It took more time, particularly when I piled on the exponents, but all of the abscissae were tied to the correct ordinates. Some were numbers over 20 digits long. There will be a test 2 days from now to assess how well the implant is working. First, the doctor says that I have to possess a cursory familiarity with some slightly higher level math. He simply means that I need to not be absolutely illiterate in the language I am internally being given a pristine translation of. July 8th. The test went well. I got all the answers correctly. If I can say I, that is. This was about calculus. I did my best to understand it, and I think I got the gist of it. Incremental change to x related to the corresponding change in y. But I can't be sure if I got the gist of it. I am trying to joke here, meaning that I am not sure if I got it, since I always had the help of the other area in my brain, which kept bombarding me with information. This was actually beautiful, to see all the shifts happening when I contemplated the change from a function to its derivative. This is about the slope, and its integral. This is about the area below it, and in a way it's the inverse. But unlike with the parabolas or other basic functions which I had learned before on my own, in the case of this new math, I cannot be sure if my understanding was independent enough of the implant. Strongly urged as I am to use parallels in regards to how I could answer all the questions correctly, I told the doctor that it wasn't at all as if someone kept whispering the answer in my ear, or that I would see it on the screen of some calculator. Instead, my helper was much more like a magician who could fill the sky of my imagination with fireworks made of dancing lines and curves, and by looking at those, I would end up thinking of a number without actually being conscious of how one led to the other. It's not easy for me to describe, but when I was asked to elaborate, I did far worse, and the doctor stopped questioning me at that point. I will need to rethink it. Perhaps I should ask the other area of my brain for a more rigorous definition? Actually, no, I just did, and the lines and curves swirled far more violently, obviously because this wasn't a purely mathematical question. July 16th. Yesterday, we filmed the last of the segments for the commercial. It went quite well, although I had a rash from something I ate. The doctor said that it didn't matter, joking that we might just pretend that I am in high school. I daydreamed a little. I couldn't help it, this being the first time that so many people will know of me. On account of the implant, it's true. But I am becoming more accustomed to it, and also started reading a lot of math on my own, with the known issue of spontaneous injection of insight by the implant. I shouldn't be hasty, however, and it wasn't a good idea to ask that my own proof of something quite insignificant and basic, establishing the formula for the coordinates of the vertex of parabolas through the addition of the minimal root to half the distance between the roots, was to be included in the ad in some segment about comparing how the implant exists in harmony with one's own mind. He was entirely against my idea from the start and wasn't enticed to give in, even when I offered to also mention how the implant-controlled part in my brain reacted to the proof. July 28th. I can accept that it would be a bit out of place in the commercial, or rather not out of place, but too specific. And certainly, you wouldn't try to market any product by mentioning what can appear to be some type of resistance to it. Still, the more I think of it, the less inclined I am to feel happy with his reaction to what I said. He isn't the one who has the implant, and if he actually, as I now tend to suspect, believes that all reflection on the challenges it creates has to remain secret, that's hardly commendable. Of course, this wasn't my view 12 days ago. Each day brings me more understanding of what I now have in my brain, and also allows me to form a better appreciation of the shapes it produces in my imagination. Back then, I was under the illusion that what I was seeing, remarkable as it was, would be an exact copy of the relevant illustrations in a sufficiently well-written math book. It's not that, though. Yesterday, I kept scrutinizing the new books I was given, and nowhere did I find anything resembling the way the implant demonstrated the same subjects the books were presenting. I asked him about it, but he tried to convince me that the books merely happened to utilize a different approach, implying that it was all a matter of chance. Then followed a very telling platitude about no book containing all possible approaches. But when I gave him a specific example, it was about the use of a series to approximate integrals and how the implant broke it up stereometrically, it was revealed that he barely could follow the math. I said nothing because I thought that certainly a watchmaker doesn't have to be conscious at all times of how every last one of the cogs inside the watch are mechanically interacting. He can go by rote after a while. But surely, if he is unaware, he can't pontificate upon their properties when I am, in a way, having discussions with the watch itself. August 3rd. I have noticed an alarming trend, which I am almost certain wasn't there from the start. The implant's area of control appears to be expanding. The doctor tried to calm me, saying that it's all just psychological, and even showed me charts about the built-in restrictions in neural use. What happens when a briefing by the Central Command would have you believe the enemy soldier on the hill in front of you can't be there? Can you close your eyes when the next time you have opened them, he could be standing next to you? I articulated my thought, and all he could focus on was how negatively I referred to the implant. But I have my reasons for doing so. If you hire someone to help you with a specific work, you don't expect them to overstep their boundaries and end up involved in everything else that you have. August 4th. Yesterday, I expressed disbelief in the possibility this was covertly happening all along, but I've since thought more about it, and it may well be the likelier case. After all, if your helper at first doesn't even need to pry, because you actually invited him in to examine everything, treating him like an oddity, asking a savant, and entertaining yourself with his curious and often childish misinterpretations, how would you ever be vigilant enough to notice that he was meaning to inspect it all, even if you were against it? August 6th. Maybe it started as a game, and along the way, insidiously, it acquired enough momentum to become irreversible. If I am to assume that it wasn't irreversible from the start, I did try to reverse it, or part of it, but each time I got the very unpleasant sense that the border of the area run by the implant is quite immune to my control. I can certainly ask it to run routines and answer questions, but not push it back or shut it down at will. While trying to, I kept visualizing that I am walking in a stairway which has partly collapsed. Below the gap stand I, unable to make the leap to the rest of the stairway, but above stands the spider-like manifestation of the implant, which easily can move over the breach. And while this is no ordinary stairway, it's more akin to millions of intersecting spirals. Perhaps the complexity will compensate the only one who can retreat to absolutely impassable terrain with all the more rapid territorial expansion. August 23rd. It is darkly comedic that I happen to read a page from the script of the commercial they will release. Contrary to what we have talked about, he decided to go with the simile, which makes the implant out to be some computer in the corner of your mind. Time and again, I had told him how this is entirely false, misleading, and will lead to grave reactions by others who will get the implant. This in no way is neutral or anodyne. A computer has no say in whether it is kept in your room, nor does it venture out of its corner to pry into what you are doing. I am tired. There can be no axiomatic basis for most of the things one is thinking, but when you are by definition requiring such a basis so as to function, you can only impose it on your fellow traveler. August 24th. Am I now really reduced to that? A fellow traveler? It is a bit like it, yes. On this train, day in, day out, sitting next to the implant personified, I imagine it as some large man in a business suit with a bloated but featureless face, going on and on about how anything I say acquires this and that meaning, but always after a point coming to the conclusion that it all needs to be reassessed and rebuilt on a starkly different foundation, and then only to come to the conclusion that the new foundation was also lacking, repeating the vicious circle. It can't be talked to either. I was wrong in that. I never was interacting with the area the implant took under its control. For you don't interact with something so alien, you are merely witnessing it, can marvel at it. But it seeks to expand, and you are territory, or a territory which curiously has the ability to ask things, and by asking you first, attract it to your presence. August 29th, I erased many pages and stopped visiting the doctor. If it all wasn't so gloomy, I would reflect on the irony of being forced to watch as the implant reacts to these thoughts too, without understanding, twisting them. Above all else, it has a problem with metaphors, likely because they are never dictated by actual homothety, but whimsically restricted analogy, by an analogy of an analogy. September 5th, I watched the commercial. October 9th, don't you present me with ways to live through this. October 29th, if I assume that it always reacts to abstract thought with interest, yes, the plan could work. Humans have zoos. November 1st, in a cage in the corner of a zoo, there lived an animal whose death would kill the universe.